Australia is the place it is today because between 1788 and 1850, 162,000 convicts were sent here as a solution to overcrowding in British prisons. So this video is going to be a bit of a breakdown of prisons, overcrowding, slavery, race, and private prisons. Okay, we're going to have to cover some basic history. Now, the American Civil War, which was 1861 to 1865, which came to an end with the 13th Amendment passing the Senate in 1864 and the House in 1865, which was to abolish slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. Now that's important, take note of that. And then since 1877 to the mid-1960s, there were Jim Crow laws, which were segregation. Black people did not have the same rights as white people, which saw the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And after the Civil Rights Act, and I guess Woodstock in 69, where it was a bunch of hippies and black people had the same rights, Nixon had the idea of the war on drugs in 1971, which was a good reason to lock up a lot of people over non-violent crimes and everything else, which led to overcrowding in the 1980s, which saw the rise of private prisons. Now, let's discuss some of the problems which have come from this series of events. Okay, the whole except as punishment for a crime, well, that got you prisoner leasing during Jim Crow, and today it can get you prisoners fighting wildfires in California for 8 cents an hour, or like $1 a day. And then when they get out, because of their record, they probably can't even join the firefighters once they've served their time. And other people and corporations that have taken advantage of this cheap labour. They were sewing Made in America labels on Victoria's Secret's lingerie that was made in Guatemala. They make McDonald's uniforms, almost like all of army helmets, police equipment, airplane parts for Boeing, Honda, Starbucks, little like cents to the hour. And when like a phone call to your family could be like $1 a minute more than that, that's why slavery is abolished except for as punishment for a crime. And then to touch on the race side of slavery and how it's still very well alive. In America, if a quarter of their population are minorities, how are half of their prison population minorities? That doesn't mathematically make sense because all races commit crimes at the same rate. And America has that many prisoners, I think it's almost like 2 million and something, where if it was a city population, it'd be like the 5th largest city. Now this leads me to the solution that America had to overcrowding. Instead of having their own little Australia, the 80s saw the rise of private prisons. Okay, in America, there are 2 major players, GEO Group and CoreCivic, which was formerly Corrections Corporation of America. Now their stocks took a bit of a dive at the end of Obama's term 2016 when he put regulations on private prisons trying to phase them out, but that was overturned in the beginning of 2017 by Jeff Sessions and the Trump administration. And here they're doing fine. Here's how their quarters have been going recently. Now, how do they make their profit? They make their profit by, they usually charge per inmate per day, and they run at low overheads, so their staff get paid less and there's usually less staff, so it's understaffed and the staff are usually undertrained and underpaid. You can see how this could lead to a range of problems. And because it is a private corporation, they don't have the same accountability as a government-run agency would. So the staffing issue has seen guards forcing inmates to make handcrafts and selling them on the side for extra money, all the way to the extreme of multiple rapes in a prison in Kentucky. And another way that they make their money is having quotas of like 90 to 100% full cell quotas, where if they don't have enough prisoners supplied to fill the cells, the state or city gets a fine. One was $3 million, so that has the incentive to have more people arrested, or else they'll get, as they're called, a low crime tax. And you can see how that is very problematic. Another way they've made money is through bribery, that they'll lobby politicians, and in some places that's perfectly legal, and then there's also just bribing where In 2008, there was the Kids for Cash scandal where judges, they received $1 million in bribes from private prisons to lock up children from as young as 10 for nonsense things like one kid got 2 years for going joyriding in his mum's car. And here's some words of a mum whose, I think, son was just found with some weed paraphernalia and received multiple years.
My kid's not here! He's dead! Because of him! He ruined my fucking life! I'd like him to go to hell and rot there forever!
Man, come on.
No, you know what he told everybody in court? They need to be held accountable for their actions. You need to be. Do you remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember my son? An all-star wrestler? He's good. He's got his up in the heart. You scumbag! You ruined my fucking life!
These judges were sentenced, but these private prisons ran juvenile facilities and bribed judges to fill them. That's fucked. Now, to come back to Australia, the reason this was brought to my attention is because I think the Feed did something on Parkley Correctional Centre and ABC did one on Arthur Gorey, and those two are GEO Australia Group, and they also have Junee, Fulham, Ravenhall and The Bridge on the East Coast. In Australia, our other big players are G4S and Serco. Here's how they're doing over the last few quarters. There was also ACM, Australia Correctional Management, and they ran a large amount of immigration centres around Australia. 100% of immigration to do with Australia is run by private industries, where some have renamed because of the negative impact that's come with their name through what's happened at these centres. Where in South Australia, Woolmer, which closed in 2003, it had the capacity of 400, but it ended up with 1,500 and they were riot. And I feel like this is why they have mainly offshore processing now, because then we can't mosey on with cameras and have a look as easily as if they were on the mainland. Now I have a slideshow here of one of the biggest correctional centres in WA, which is run by Serco Private Industry, and it says here that it's 35% of their inmates are Indigenous Australians, almost like they're bragging. And I find this really disturbing. I'll link the websites, and if you go through them, it just shows you how much industry rules this world, probably more than countries to some extent. And I should state that I have no problem with prisoners working, I just have a big problem with them being paid 8 cents. If you're going to get labour, you pay them properly, whether they are locked up or not, I don't care. Thank you. Like, subscribe.